Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to General Purposes. For the benefit of those watching on YouTube, members of the committee are present in the chamber and these members will be voting on proposals this evening. Other members of the council who are present in the chamber or participating via Teams can take part in discussions, ask questions, but cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how these meetings will be conducted. Before we start the formal business, we will do a member roll call. Victoria, please.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes.
In attendance.
Councillor McDermott.
Present.
Apologies been received from Councillor Banks, who was substituted by Councillor Tatton.
Present.
Apologies been received from Councillor Barton, who's been substituted by Councillor Hood.
Present.
Councillor Benison.
Present.
Apologies been received from Councillor Coffin, who's been substituted by Councillor Betts.
Present.
Councillor Clokey.
Present.
Councillor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Parry.
Present.
Councillor Roud. Councillor Tanner.
Present.
Thank you.
Very much, Victoria. So we now know the notification of substitute members, which takes us now to declarations of interest. Anybody want to declare anything? That is a negative. Excellent. Therefore, next is minutes. Here they are. Can I sign them? Much. Which takes us on to page 19, item 6, new workforce development strategy 25-28. Brooks.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening to everyone. So yes, I'm presenting to you our proposed new workforce development strategy for the next 3 years. The strategy, I mean, it's a really vital framework that we must have, and it outlines how we intend to attract, support, develop, manage and retain our workforce to deliver the council's strategic priorities. As it says in strategy, we know that our staff are our greatest asset, and this strategy does ensure that they're going to be equipped to meet our current and future challenges and hopefully have everything they need and everything required at work to support and develop them. We last updated and presented this committee with a workforce strategy in June 2022. I think it's fair to say that since then there's been a huge number of changes in terms of workforce initiatives that have emerged, which is why we've done pretty much a comprehensive review, and it looks very different to our previous workforce strategy. Since then, we've had adopted new vision and values. We've recently adopted new core behaviours that we expect all staff to now show in the workplace and engage with. And obviously, we're presenting in the report updated workforce demographics, which is going to be important that we look at that for future needs of our workforce. We comprehensively surveyed our staff last year, so it's really important that what they said has been listened to and picked up in this strategy. They say we do things well, but we want to make sure that we continue that and do things even better. And of course, as you would expect, there are things that they fed back on to say that we need to improve. And we're very committed to doing that. And that is all in there too. I think we're not trying to hide the fact that local government reorganisation is probably the biggest issue that staff are thinking about and the council faces in terms of its staff. So a central pillar of the new strategy is looking at that and making sure that staff are going to get the support they need to develop in their roles and to ensure that they're in a good place, whatever the future of local government holds for them and for all of us, really, making sure that they're skilled and adaptable. I won't go into huge amounts of details because it's all in there, but just to give a brief summary of some of the workforce profile information, it really does show that we have an ageing workforce. That isn't unusual across local government. It's something we've known about, but it does obviously highlight the fact that we do have a number of staff that are over 60s or between 55 and 60. So it's really important that we do never take our eye off the ball in terms of succession planning and ensuring that when staff do retire or look to either move on or change their hours or seek different roles, that we make sure that we capture that knowledge and there's somewhere for that knowledge transfer to go. So that's going to be a big focus. Recruitment and retention, we know that's an issue for vast majority of councils across the country. We're no different. We all have slightly different challenges. We all know about the planning staff that we've had. We've got a market supplement in place to try and address that. But it's really important that we look to develop our staff as a way to retain them and to become an attractive employer, to ensure that we have a pipeline of new people joining the organisation. So we're looking at enhancing career pathway opportunities, as well as trying to adopt more flexible and quicker recruitment strategy to fill vacancies as they become available. And it's really clear that we need to focus on succession planning and leadership skills, and developing a number of programs to equip staff to make sure that the ever-changing service requirements are met. So we're focusing on 4 key areas. They are the sort of the top line areas. There's a number of strands under them, and there's a vast number of strands under the strands within the strategy that, you know, we'll be going into over the next 3 years. So the 4 key pillars are focusing on talent and development, which is investing in, you know, targeted learning to create opportunities for staff growth and career progression, as I've said. Recruitment and retention, being more flexible in our approaches to a recruitment, establishing those career pathways and ensuring that we do a number of initiatives to ensure that we retain skilled staff, keep them motivated and ensure they've got opportunity. Wellbeing and recognition, I think that's something we do really well at the moment, but we can never rest on our laurels. We offer lots of sort of flexible working practices. We're, I do believe, a very supportive employer. But again, that's something that you can never take your eye off the ball. And it's really important that we do a bit more, particularly around recognition, looking to sort of reward staff more. We're not talking financially, but we're just talking, you know, formal recognition schemes and build on what we're already doing there. And I think the most important, well, arguably I shouldn't say that. I think they're all important, but the newest one and the one that's going to get a lot of attention is sort of preparing our staff for change. As I've said, we recognise that the next 3 years, possibly longer, we don't know, are going to be a really big period of change for staff. A lot of uncertainty, but we want to make sure that they're ready to face those challenges. And as I say, they're going to be in a good position, whatever new organisation it might be, to sort of move on from this organisation and thrive there. So to sum up, really, in terms of implementation and monitoring, we will obviously be bringing this strategy back to this committee annually. We're going to be continuously sort of monitoring it, various feedback mechanisms. It'll be really interesting to see our staff survey results at the end of towards the end of this year, to see where we've hopefully improved on and where staff have seen some positive changes. We're being clear with the staff learning and development budget that's listed in the strategy that there's £120,000 per year to support all of these initiatives. I think we're asking really for members to approve this today, and we'll then start the process of engaging with staff, possibly refining the strategy slightly where we need it, but it's more about gaining their buy-in, explaining it to them, and we'll be looking to do that throughout March, subject to the outcome of this committee. So I think that's all I really wanted to say on it. So thank you.
Matthew, members. Oki was first.
Okay. Just looking at the reporting section, one question and a comment, I think. You reference KPIs for workforce effectiveness. Have we got a decision on what those KPIs are? And just on the feedback on that, I mean, twice a year to the council management team and once a year to GPs. It's quite a big gap between feedbacks. Is it worth considering having potentially smaller reports more frequently in between those?
Councillor Parry?
Thank you, Chair. It was just a couple of things that I would queries and observations going through it. One was, it says about the annual training budget of 120,000 a year for the next 3 years. I was curious, is this a new thing, or what was it prior to this? The other thing, or in previous years, the other thing was I did find it very interesting looking at the analysis of the workforce and the general figures there. Found quite interesting. Just in particular, I looked at the turnover and sickness. It looks like it's a trend. They're both getting higher. They both peaked in 21-22, and I wondered if something, we're aware of what was particularly going on in that year, that why it was high. But generally, the trend for both are increasing. Do we know what 24-25 looks like? Have we booked this trend, or does it look like it's going to carry on? And then the other point was about you talk about the training budget and things, and the money for the market supplement. With recruitment being a necessity with the turnover, is there a budget for recruitment as well? Is that something that's been set? Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you for the questions. If I take them in the order that they came in, that's probably the best thing. So in terms of the sort of how we'll feed back on it, I mean, I think we've sort of set what we intend to do, but there'll be, we will be looking at it, throughout the year. Obviously, within HR, the HR management team, within our service management teams, in central and executive service. So I think, I think that should be sufficient, but if for some reason that isn't, then it's absolutely that we can change it. And I think we've sort of set out towards the end of the document, what our specific actions and milestones are going to be. So I think we've made clear sort of where we intend to go on that. So I believe that they're efficient, I should say. Okay for that one. If I move on, in terms of the annual training budget, it's been £80,000 for the past few years. We have had budget in reserve. A large part of that is sort of the years of the pandemic. There just wasn't people going on training courses and doing training in that way. So it's the intention to, utilise those reserves, add them to the core budget, to ensure that we can actually do some, new initiatives. It still is not a huge budget when it's less than £500 per member of staff per year. So we need to be creative with how we use that. But it's the first time we're essentially saying to staff, we've got this money and we intend to spend it on your development and on a raft of new initiatives. So that one. Turnover and sickness. When you look at those years, for sure, there's a little bit of movement in terms of we had very little turnover, sort of going back 4 years ago during the first year of the pandemic. It keeps cropping up, that word. So there's very little movement. People did then tend to move a bit more after that, but it has largely stabilised, and turnover is quite healthy in terms of comparing it to the UK average in the public sector. And our sickness is sort of lower than I think pretty much all neighbours in Kent, and again with the public sector. So it can really change year on year if you get a few people that are off long term, for unfortunate long term illnesses. That can really sort of kind of push up the stats or seemingly have a negative impact. We think sickness is slightly higher than this year. Again, we've had a lot of people, off for quite unfortunate and quite random things that have impacted, but we don't think it's going to be substantially higher. We're nearly at the end of the reporting year, so it won't be substantially higher than what it has been, and turnover will be a little bit lower too than the previous year. So I think it's all within a sort of a fairly healthy sort of net balance of each other. I think the last one, we do have a recruitment budget. Most of the budget tends to be where we've got vacancies and there's no one in post for that period of time. So we sort of use that money for recruitment, advertising and things like that. But again, it's quite a small contained recruitment budget. I think that answers the initial question. Thank you.
Robin. Thank you, Chairman.
Obviously not normally a member of this committee, but I've got an observation nonetheless, and that's under the key pillar 3, wellbeing and recognition. I'm just wondering if maybe something, I mean, it might be covered in all of these headings, but something to add is just encouraging staff to apply for more national public recognition awards. I say that because obviously of last week, Des Kears and Anthony Garnett went and attended, expecting not to come away with anything at all, and managed to get a silver. I mean, that's a great achievement. What it does give is certainly the staff a bit of a pat on the back, really. That what they've done is really good, and it's been recognised nationally. So I'm sure it gives those staff members a feeling of success, boost morale, and is that recognition of their achievement. The other one was for climate change, in terms of our how we applied ourselves for grants in the public sector decarbonisation scheme. So we're in the finalists for that. Again, it's just a recognition for those staff when they work really hard and they get that kind of recognition. It's a good way forward. So I would just add that to that list, really. Thank you.
Councillor Betts. Anyone else? Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to highlight the fact that our staff are our most important asset, and I think it's well acknowledged that our workforce is fairly lean. You know, we're not overloaded with staff members, but we do have really good quality staff. And the fact that we're going to increase the acknowledgement of their good work in the form of awards, I think is a really good thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a monetary reward, but just to acknowledge good work, it can only be a great thing for us. I noticed in the report that there's mention of the Women's Network, which we launched last week. You were there, Matt, actually, one of the very few men that were there. I was there, and I have to say, it started an initiative of this kind really well. We had a couple of speakers from outside. So we had the Chief Executive of TM Active come in and talk to us, and we had the Chief Executive from RBLI. And they were such inspiring women, talking about their career and how they've got to the level that they're at. That was a really worthwhile morning spent listening to everybody talk about that, I feel. And the ladies in our employment here were encouraged to find a mentor to help them, you know, enhance their career if that's what they want to do. So that was a really positive thing has just started last week. And I was just going to ask Matt if we need to attract younger staff members, it might be good to have some really young people in the organisation. Are we thinking about sort of apprenticeship type positions or initiatives like that, where we could internships or anything like that? I just wonder if that's something we've thought about. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you for the questions. To take the first one, yeah, absolutely. We are really committed now to, you know, asking staff to really identify and identifying external awards ourselves. That's something Damien has been really keen to bring in, and as you've said, it's already proved to be very successful. I think we're sort of 2 for 2. So that's fantastic. It's not in there explicitly. We have got a sort of a staff survey action plan from there, and it's listed in there too. We haven't listed every single initiative in there, but no, it's absolutely, you know, I think staff, even if you're not in anywhere near that service, when a news story comes on Staffnet and it's celebrating organisational success that's been nationally recognised, and it really is gives just a nice boost, and it sort of makes you appreciate where you work as well. So absolutely committed to that, and I hope there'll be many more external awards coming over the next few years. Quite happy to make that explicit in the strategy too. Other points, in terms of, yeah, we're developing an internal staff awards now, so that's literally being launched in the next day or two. Staff are aware of it. We asked staff to come up with a name for it, and they've come up with the Excellence in Action Awards. The members of the JACC committee came up with a long list. MT produced a short list from the long list, and then all staff got to have a final vote. So we're trying to, be collaborative with staff and bring them along in the journey too. Staff will be able to vote for sort of individuals or teams and things like that, and they're all linked to the core behaviours and to the vision and values of the council. So we're trying to just really create, more so than we ever have, this sort of sense of an organisation and everything tying in with everything else. So it doesn't have to be financial. I've worked in places before where it has been, and you get mixed reactions with that. But I think absolutely people do like to be recognised for any kind of recognition, even if they say they don't. So no, we're hoping that's going to have a really positive impact as well. Remind myself of the next question. Yes, the Women's Network was absolutely fantastic, and you kicked the whole thing off and we chaired the whole thing, so that was really great that to have so many people there. We definitely want to encourage more males to attend, but it's really got support across the organisation. And how do we attract young people to the council? I mean, we have had apprentices in the past. It's been tricky keeping them sometimes. We do always look to see whether vacant posts can be an apprenticeship opportunity. So that's always been something that we want to do. It's never off the agenda, but it's proven quite tricky to actually get certain posts to become apprentices. We've got to really make sure that we're not doing it for the sake of creating an apprentice, to make sure that the post that we really do need is filled. But absolutely, that's always on the table.
Thank you. So, Mr. Brooks, does the addition from Councillor Betts make this a substantive change? Does that need to come back to this?
I personally don't think it will be a substantive change. If we can just expand about, we've already got a formal staff awards there, so put that in because it's something that's already been identified that we're doing. Okay,
if everyone's happy then. Oh, Councillor Parry.
I just wanted to add a couple of more things. One was I saw mention here of the TNBC has an employees assistance programme, and I was curious about that. I've worked both where I work now, and it was introduced, I think, at a company I worked at quite a while ago, and I thought it was something that was a great benefit, and yet I was amazed, especially where I am now, of how few staff are aware of it. I was curious. I think it is a huge benefit if it's used by staff, and I wondered how much, if you're aware of how much it is being utilised by the staff you have. And then the other thing I was surprised not to see more mention of in this report, in both this agenda and the next one, it was just very vaguely mentioned, is the remote working policy. And I can see that it's a great benefit for an awful lot of members of staff. But I do wonder sometimes whether it doesn't have a potentially negative impact on particularly new and younger members of staff. It works very well from my experience with old established teams, but when you take on somebody new, training and making them feel part of a team can be very difficult when most of the team work remotely for a large proportion of the time. And I just wondered whether you had any views on that.
Brooks.
Thank you. We've had the employee assistance programme in certainly since before I joined in 2018, and our former chief executive Julie was a real champion of it. Did not shy away from saying that she accessed the service herself. For those of you that may not know what an employee assistance programme is, amongst many other things, its main sort of selling point and usage is it's a confidential counselling service for staff. They can access a number of confidential telephone counselling services, and if felt by the counsellors that in-person counselling is needed, then they can access that too. There's also a huge amount of other advice that isn't quite as confidential. Staff can ring up for certain legal advice, financial advice and things like that. So it's there for all employees and anyone in their household to access. And it's something that we've had for a long time. We do know staff engage with it a lot. We don't obviously due to the nature of it, get too much information, but we do know that lots of, a high percentage of staff have accessed it and continue to, and that number's going up rather than down. In our staff survey, some staff said they weren't aware of it. It may have been how we phrased the question, but we'll take that they're not aware. So another big action plan is to, part of our staff survey action plan is to keep promoting that. It's being developed all the time. There's an app that staff can use, so it hasn't always got to be about, counselling or seeking help. Dietary things that they can do, and exercise programs, and lots of various other positive things for sort of health and well-being. So it's very well used, and I think most staff know about it. But again, until every member of staff knows about it, we can always do a bit more. So keen to do that. In terms of remote working, I mean, we've been working remotely now for 5 years, and I think all new staff expect an element of it too. We've got a separate remote working policy that came to this committee a couple of years ago. No member of staff has a contractual right to work from home. It can be changed. Services do change, and we have brought certain teams back to the office where it's been needed, where it's been required, or where the actual service has changed rather. So with face-to-face meetings with customers, that if we deem that is important, then that happens as opposed to via Teams. We strongly encourage and we make sure that all new staff are in the office early on. There might be some rare examples where the person doesn't need to be, and their managers, I say generally, I think all managers accept that they'll need to be in the offices more to train those staff. I'm in the office quite a bit. New staff have always walked around. But again, we are in a slightly different world now. So, we've got policies to make sure that staff have cameras on during meetings, that new staff have meetings set up, encouraged to be in person. But I think it is important, but also we are sort of surveying staff after induction around their sense of the organisation and newly joining us, and it's always been positive. So we haven't seen a huge number of staff leave after they've joined. It's something we're very aware of, and we don't just sort of let staff come in, pick up a laptop, and off they go back to their home.
Can I just ask, is there a minimum requirement with the home working? Is there you have to be in the office 2 days a week, or what is it?
No, we've never put a minimum figure on it. It really is down to chief officers and service managers to determine what works best for their service. So generally speaking, I'd say that a large percentage of the council come in 1 or 2 days a week, some more. Some teams are in all the time because that's the nature of their service. Some teams have chosen to be in far more than that because they like it. So we haven't, it's something that, speaking with other colleagues, it's been debated quite a lot amongst the heads of HR. Some councils of Kent have put a sort of a minimum figure on it, and they haven't seen anything particularly different to what we've seen in terms of improving anything. So we've always said that I think we've got a really good policy where staff know that they haven't got the right to work from home 5 days a week forevermore. There may be a handful of staff that are seldom in the office, and some roles, might lend themselves to that, or there might be some experienced staff who they, just work quite individually. But generally speaking, most staff are in the office at least 1 day a week or.
Very much. Councillor Hood.
I wasn't going to speak on this item. I was going to speak on the next item, but Councillor Parry's actually raised the topic I was going to ask about, which is home working. Because obviously there are certain roles where you can work from home. I'm thinking of solicitors, where we've struggled to attract solicitors in the past. That's a role that you could have somebody living in another county in the north of England. So that would help us with recruitment in that respect. And obviously with climate change, when we've got the climate impact of commuting, the greater proportion of people who can do so while still being effective in their roles, obviously is advantageous to the council as well. So I just wanted to ask do we benchmark ourselves? Because I know that you've alluded to the fact that lots of other councils in Kent do this, and I know that Swale Borough Council, when they've embraced this wholeheartedly, and it sounds like we've gone down that route as well. So is it possible that we can see how we compare with others? And with the staff survey, is that something that HR uses internally, or is it something that it can be shared with members as well? Thank you very much.
Brooks?
Thank you very much. We haven't formally benchmarked. I mean, I attend a heads of HR across Kent network remotely once, I think it's 3 times a year. And the general feedback has been that most policies are similar to ours. There's been a few councils have sort of mandated 2 days a week, but they've said that they don't fully police that. So that's something that, you know, I can very easily reach out to colleagues to find out. But my sense is that most councils have taken a similar approach to ours on that. And sorry, I forget the latter part of the question now.
The staff survey, is that accessible to members so they can have an insight into the state of play?
I don't know. I don't see why it couldn't be, but I can check that out with Adrian, if it has been shared already, or can it be shared.
Okay, thank you. Everybody's happy now. We've got 2 recommendations at 3.1 and 3.2. Can I have your approval? That was unanimous. Thank you very much. Takes us on to page 39, agenda item 7, the Gender Pay Gap Report. This is an information only item, please note. So if you do want to ask a question, be fairly short and precise. Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report that comes to this committee annually. We've been reporting on our gender pay gap since 2017. It's a requirement that an organisation of our size, which is slightly above the threshold of 250, that we report, and it's obviously important that we do. I think I always try and make the point up front that we know our gender pay gap is big. It's certainly one of the biggest in Kent, and it doesn't fare particularly well nationally. There are reasons for that that we think in the report, but as I always have to make the distinction up front that this is gender pay gap is different to equal pay. Equal pay is ensuring that there is fairness in pay for the same or equivalent work which men and women do, whereas gender pay gap, what difference is within any one organisation between what the average pay of men is compared to women. So I always just want to make that important distinction up front. So our workforce is predominantly women, 67% female, 33%, give or take, male. And it's actually increased in the 12 months from the reporting period of March last year by 4%. Somewhat disappointingly, the gap has increased from nearly 19% to 22.9% for the median gender pay gap, which is probably the clearer metric of the two. And the median gender pay gap has increased from 22.24 to 28.86. So the positive gains we made in 2023 have sort of swung back to almost where they were the year before. They're not as high as when we first started reporting this in 2017, but not really something to be shouting about per se. It's very hard to make a huge amount of change in any one given year, because we have, in the last report, you sort of see that the turnover rate is around 10%. So there's very little you could really do based on sort of vacancies alone when they come up. We've seen a positive increase in the number of females in both the upper and the upper middle pay quartiles, but the disparity that exists in the lower and lower middle quartiles has increased as well. We've seen that as a result, far more women entered our organisation in the past year than men, an equal amount of men left than women, and I think another sort of key factor is obviously our chief executive left compared to the previous reporting year, who was our most senior, highest paid officer, and they were female. So that's a very significant single member of staff to leave in terms of when you actually put together the data. We continue to, we really do take this seriously. It's something, as I say, it's really hard to suddenly turn around unless we were going to simply pay the vast majority of our staff in the lower quartiles who are female a significant pay rise. But we don't believe that's fair or in line with our job evaluation scheme or anything like that. We are trying to do lots of things. We've introduced at the last meeting of this committee, you approved the council's new policy on menopause in the workplace. That's launched. We think that's a really positive policy to have, to both sort of retain women in the workplace and attract as well. We've just touched on the fact that we launched last week a women's network, and that's completely independent. That's not something that HR have launched. That has been a wonderful idea from one of our officers, Liv Miller, in the property team, who came to myself and Adrian with that idea, and she's very keen that this particular topic is presented to and discussed with the Women's Network. And if there's, we will absolutely welcome any ideas, any new approaches that network might have in order to try and lessen the gap. We know that we've got far more women in our workforce. We've outsourced roles that other councils haven't, such as waste services, that tend to have traditionally men in the lower paid roles that sort of can check the balance. But we do believe that this is not about discriminating. This isn't about treating women unfairly. When we look at vacancies, when we evaluate roles, it's got no gender in mind. It's purely about what the role is and the complexities of that role. We're absolutely committed to reducing the pending gender pay gap, and we don't believe at any stage of the recruitment process putting anyone at any kind of disadvantage. So it's disappointing to see the gap increase. I think there's some clear reasons why that has been in the last 12 months, or in the previous reporting period, 12 months. And I think that is the case of we are where we are at the moment.
Have members any queries? Councillor Cloakey.
Just thinking, because obviously our pay gap's largely driven by that upper quartile. In terms of roles at those top paying jobs, what proportion are we recruiting externally and what proportion are we promoting from within? Because obviously we've got very large in our workforce in lower paying roles who presumably, ideally, we would like to be developing into those more senior positions.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it certainly isn't a case that men are sort of going up the organisation quickly from the lower roles or anything like that. A lot of trying to think really that there hasn't been a huge amount of movement, particularly in that upper quartile as well. We saw the year before, we saw the gender pay gap come down, and we I think at the time sort of could attribute that to sort of several of the most senior appointments in sort of upper middle and upper were females joining the organisation, majority external from memory. But absolutely, we've talked about looking at career pathways, and if we get that right, and we know we've got women in more junior positions, and that should hopefully go some way to sort of lessening the gap.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, right then. So I still think it's odd, everybody, that on an information report we have a recommendation, but there we are. So we need to note that. So can we note that? Everyone's noted that. Thank you very much. So page 47. I have no urgent items to deal with. Therefore, I will move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting during consideration of any items, the publication of which would disclose exempt information. Do I have your support? Thank you very much. So we'll wait for Joanne to switch off the YouTube channel. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanne.